A lot of you have been asking for real-time painting demos where I take you through the whole process of doing a painting, start to finish, without skipping things or speeding up the process too much. That only really works if you have a very direct way of painting. And I'm going to show you that today. This is an unusual way of painting, and let me point out exactly what I mean. This is the painting I'll be doing, and I'll take you through the whole thing. It's done in gouache, white and black gouache on grayish paper. So let me just get started with the simplest part of this process, which is the skull. By painting the skull first, I'll have the foundation of the portrait, because especially in an older person, the skull is visible right through the skin. So I'm going to paint the skull here using a large synthetic round brush. Norman Rockwell said, always keep the structure of the skull in mind. The basis of every head is the skull structure. What Rockwell would do is place a piece of tracing paper over his drawing at various stages, so he knew where the skull was and where the landmarks were in a given pose. Now, using thinned down ivory black gouache and a large synthetic round brush, I'm painting in not only the background behind the skull, but also a little bit of the side plane. And I can use some opaque white, titanium white, to block in the big shapes of the skull here, where they're receiving light. The cheekbone on the side of the zygomatic arch, then down to the mouth barrel. I'm doing this mostly from memory. Now, if I was just watching this, I would say, now what are you doing painting the skull? Because this is something you can't see when you look at a model. You can sort of tell where maybe some of the landmarks are, but you don't know where the skull really is. And what I'm not putting down at all are the mouth or the bottom of the nose or the eyes. So what's the point of painting something you can't see and trying to guess at what a skull would look like? The answer is that I'm discovering the form in the paint, and I'm just building a foundation for later layers. Here's the line at the bottom of the top teeth. And the teeth should be felt below the lips if I do this right. There's that little hollow underneath the zygomatic arch where the chewing muscles would be. Now, we won't see the skull when the painting is finished, but we'll feel it, hopefully. And I told you at the beginning that this is an unusual way of painting. And it really is. At the end of this video, I'll reveal some tricks and secrets about how I'm doing this that you may not have guessed in watching this. A lot of you are used to doing a portrait after doing a careful line drawing, and you notice, of course, that I have not done a pencil drawing at all to work out the placement of the eyes or the ears or anything else. I'm just doing a straight ahead painting. But I'm starting with a skull for another reason. More of a conceptual reason, philosophical reason, because I love this concept that a person could begin their life as a skull, that they could be born from the grave and end up in the cradle. So let's play with this thought for a second. Now, you may know there was a movie called Benjamin Button, where a guy is born as an old man, and he gets younger and younger as his life proceeds forward through time. But this is a little bit different. What if you began life as a skull, as a dead person, and you came to life at that moment before dying, and each day that you lived, you got a day younger. So you're actually not moving forward through time the way Benjamin Button did, but you're moving back. Each day, you're moving back another day. What you remember is not your youth, but your old age as you get younger and younger. And you're anticipating, because you don't know, what your earlier life might be like. After all, everything is based on a sense of time moving in a certain direction, which is only based on this idea of a chain of consciousness from one day to the next. We perceive our chain of consciousness as moving forward through time, and we remember our earlier life. We see ourselves getting older. But what if it was the other way around? Each day you woke up a little bit stronger, a little bit younger. So we would rise from the earth as a skull and a collection of bones, cold and blind. And then our skull would be fitted with eyes and clothed with skin. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm fitting eyes into this eye sockets, and I'm putting a nose on over that hollow. So we would arrive in the evening of our lives. Our skin would be lined with the marks of pain and sorrow and pride. But how much would our accomplishments matter to us if we're getting younger each day? We would cast away our trophies and our medals along the muddy road, trading wisdom for foolishness, accomplishment for novelty. We would see clothing as costumes. We'd put on our hats and gloves and silks and dresses, knowing that youth will come as a flash of fire. I love to imagine that tomorrow actually precedes today, and eventually, if we wait long enough, yesterday will come without us knowing what it will bring. In a backward life, we would start with a scar, and in a day or more, it would turn into a wound, and then the accident would happen, and then the unawareness before the accident. In a backward life, we would give up our habits one by one. People who had died will come to life around us and rejoin the company. So that's what I'm thinking as I'm painting this person. She's emerged from the grave as a skull, and now she's an old woman, not knowing when she wakes up tomorrow in what way she may be stronger, in what way her old friends that had disappeared will return. So as you can see, I'm covering up the middle tone paper with light and dark, trying to make the statement quickly. If I have something I want to put down as a stroke, I just do it as a simple stroke. Sometimes it's opaque, sometimes it's transparent. If I need to soften an edge, I can just wet the brush and touch it to the edge, and it'll soften to a nice blended edge. Gouache rewards efficient handling. It likes it when you lay down a touch and leave it. Gouache isn't happy when you work over an area too many times. But that's sort of like life too, isn't it? I mean, we say something or we do something, and there it sits there, and we have to live with the consequences. Same thing with gouache. Put down a stroke and you live with it. You can always change it maybe later, but you can't fool with it forever. Now we got a few of the wrinkles, but I'm more interested in the big forms than I am with the wrinkles. I haven't really defined the far edge of her nose because It's basically a light mass against the light of her cheek. I'm trying to use this portrait as a magic mirror to see through to her skull, and also to see through to her youthful face beneath the older face. Here's the bottom edge of the eye socket. And I know where that is because of painting that skull already. The front plane of the nose catching a lot of light. Now moving quickly through this stage. But basically you can see what I'm doing, just fine-tuning each little area. But now let's move down to some of her costume details. She's wearing some kind of medallion or clasp for her cape. And I'm just going to paint that with blobs of white gouache. This heavyweight Canson paper is a middle toned grayish brown, and the nice thing about that is that both white strokes and black strokes will read clearly against it. I'm trying not to use too many middle tone grays. Sometimes I like to finish the face first and do the rest afterward, because I know how loose I can go. As long as the face is finished, everything around it can be painted fairly loosely if it's not necessary to understand what's going on in the scene. There's a few dots in the black area there. Now some dry brush on the left for kind of a fur area. Some loose strokes. This is almost purely abstract here, but hopefully it'll look complete when I finish it. I'm using a long flat brush. Diagonal strokes. Every stroke should be done with intention. But I don't think in terms of mark making as such. I think in terms of having a variety of tools and using them to represent as much of the truth I'm looking at, as much reality as I can in the time that I have. We see her little strokes for her hair, for her wrinkles, but I don't want to make too much of the wrinkles, so I'm going to unify that together. And there are a few dark lines here. I promised you at the beginning that I'd let you know about the method I'm using for doing this painting because it is unusual. And the secret is I'm using what's called a comparator mirror. It was made famous in a video called Tim's Vermeer about Tim Jennison, who used this mirror. It's a mirror held at 45-degree angle above your work, with your copy held behind it so that you can look in the mirror and see the finished copy in a virtual way right where your painting is. I just took away the mirror so you can see how it looks without it, but the mirror fits into that base on the left. This particular prototype was made by a gentleman named Thomas Georgeson, who has a YouTube channel called Painting Lab, and I'll put a link up there so you can find your way over if you want to learn more about this. I believe Thomas is hoping to make these commercially available at some point, but using this prototype, I found it was a remarkable experience, quite different from using a lucograph or a grid system. With those other copying or tracing methods, I always have the feeling that I have to paint inside the lines, and that if I cover over the lines, I might lose touch with the intricacies of the photo. But with a comparator mirror, I feel free to paint in a more carefree way because I always have the photo as a net to catch me. So perhaps you can see that my first experimental painting uses a fairly loose and painterly method. What I also like about this comparator mirror that I tried was it seemed relatively viewpoint independent, and even both eyes could easily compare the copy or painting without having to refocus or hold the head in a certain position, since the virtual image is always at the same focal distance as the painting. So I'll probably try it again, but to be honest, the tool probably had a somewhat limited usefulness in my professional work. That's because, as far as I understand it, it only allows copying flat photos rather than dimensional real life. And it only copies 1:1. You can't scale it up or down. And of course it reverses the image. But still, the experience was remarkable, and I recommend that any artist, beginning or experienced, give it a try at least once if they're curious about the tools for drawing and painting accurately. So, to sum up, this has been a fun experiment, but not an impressive painting. It's just a copy of a photo. But it's a copy of a photo in a different way than just tracing it and filling in the shapes. I'll leave some links in the description below and a couple of videos and playlists. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss my next one. And check out my website where I have lots of signed books. Thanks for checking it out. See you next time.